Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. My, oh my, what are we going to talk about today? I have no idea. There's just nothing big going on in the NBA right now, except for a little something with Kevin Durant. We're going to spend most of the show talking about that. Before we dive into it, quick reminder, we do have our new Clips channel, which I would recommend you go check out. Use the link in the description below over on our YouTube channel. You can go find it there, take all of our short form content in, and enjoy that as well. So do us a favor, go subscribe to the NBA Front Office Clips channel. But Keith, let's just dive right into it. This whole situation, I think it calls for a Kevin Cannon.
Fire!
I was not expecting this. When I made that drop, I was in no way anticipating that we would have a cannon of this size going off here. Kevin Durant meeting with Nets owner Joe Tsai in London, of all places, to tell him that he still wants out, continues with his trade request, and he wants Sean Marks and Steve Nash gone. What was your initial reaction when that news broke? Because I think my jaw hit the floor.
Yeah, it was what is, I don't remember the soap opera, but it's as the sands through the hourglass. These are
As
the
the
days of
world
our
turns.
yeah, something like that. Or Days of Our Lives, maybe.
Oh,
I don't know. I only watched partial parts of those when I was a kid when I was homesick. And my grandmother would have them on, or like a half day or a day off from
right.
school. She went right from The Price is right into the soap operas, and I'd watch like the first couple minutes, and then I was out. Like I went out to the yard to play or whatever. Yeah, man, it's the soap opera in Brooklyn. That was my long lead into that. I don't know what to make of this anymore, other than Kevin Durant doesn't want to be there. We're gonna get to him. Sounds like Kyrie Irving's got some issues too. I think we kind of knew that. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because now we're getting. It was heavily reported a couple years ago that Kevin Durant was instrumental in the Nets hiring Steve Nash.
Mhm.
Now we're getting people walking that back, saying, he wasn't that involved in that hire to begin with, and all this stuff. And it's like, where are we going with this? Joe Tsai himself tweeted, Steve Nash and Sean Marks have my full backing, or whatever it was. We'll make the best decisions in the best interest of the Nets. So I don't know that this means we're any closer to a trade, but I do think we're headed to, this is probably going to get really messy.
I mean, look, this is so there's a little bit of a weird conflict here when you look at what's gone on. So number one, he still wants to be traded, but if you still want to be traded, why put forth this idea? Well, but I want you to fire these two guys. Is
Sure.
this a fire these two guys, fire Steve Nash, fire Sean Marks, and I'll stay? Or is this fire these guys if you have any hope of bringing me back? I mean, what is laid out here on the table for the Nets? What's the decision that they have to make? And can the Nets even do that? If you're the Brooklyn Nets, can you turn around now and fire Steve Nash, fire Sean Marks in order to appease Kevin Durant?
Yeah. So to the first part of your question, there was they around what like how do you, is this a trade me or fire them question? That doesn't seem super clear from the
Yeah.
reporting, because normally we've gotten those before where it's like, hey, that guy or me, like, make your
Yep.
decision. This seems like it's like fire them but still trade me anyway, which if that's the case, then no, I'm just
So,
gonna trade
right.
you,
Why
right?
fire them?
Yeah, why would I fire these people? And it's tough because if you're the Nets, if you go back to, right, Sean Marks took over in 2016, took over, really running that basketball operation late in the 2015-16 season. He took over a team that was completely like bottomed out. They didn't have their draft picks because Boston had them. Their talent pool was extremely shallow, and he basically took the approach of, look, that's all sunk cost. I can't fix that. Let's start churning. We're gonna, we'll sign 1 million guys. We'll bring them all in. Maybe a few of them pop. That's what happened with Spencer Dinwiddie. That's what happened with Joe Harris. A couple other guys also looked pretty good. And then they started building back up. through a series of pretty good moves. If you're the Nets, you have to look at it and say, do we want to undo the last 6+ years of history with a guy who has a proven track record of building pretty good teams for a player who, and this is under the assumption that Durant will then say, I'm good, I'm going to stay.
Right.
For a player who has a track record of maybe a year or two from now anyway, he's like, yeah, it still sucks. I want out. Like, I don't know that you do that. Now, Nash, I don't know that I'd be super attached. If I was the Nets, you've only had him for a couple years. The first year was a complete mess of a situation for him coaching wise. This year, past year, still kind of a circus, but a little more stable. But yeah, I don't think I would choose the aging player who seems to be unhappy anyway over at a bare minimum the GM that I feel very confident in can build a at least a good team with the Nets.
And just in terms of the optics, this
Sure.
is out. It's not like the Nets made this move behind closed doors and say, and put out the press release, we're wishing, Sean Marks the best, and we're
Mm-hmm.
going a different direction or something like that. And this never got out. No, this is out that Kevin Durant wants him gone. If these guys are fired now, if the Nets move on from them now, and again, Joe Tsai tweeted his support for them, so I'd imagine that's not the path they're going to go down.
Mm-hmm.
That is a horrendous look for the Brooklyn Nets. I don't think they can do that because that's just, look, we already know they've given Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving the keys to the kingdom and all of that and given them a lot of power in the organization. But if you do this now, that's just confirmation that these guys, these star level players that you brought in, they run the organization.
Yep.
You gave up all control if you do this now for a player who's been wanting out. I just don't think organizationally the Nets can realistically do this, which means we're probably looking at, I think it's now more likely that the Nets move on from Kevin Durant because you have to imagine, like, if you're Joe Tsai, you're a billionaire, and this player just came to you and told you to fire two guys that are pretty important in your organization. Sean Marks, of course, probably being, like you said, maybe a little bit higher up on that ladder than Steve Nash is. Your reaction has got to be, no, why would I do that? I'm going to trade Kevin Durant before I would do this because I own the team.
Yeah.
I'm the one who makes these decisions. You're not telling me how to run my organization anymore. I think the Nets are at that point. They're at that breaking point where you just say, enough. We're done with this. You got us in this mess to begin with. Doing all the kind of stuff that Kevin Durant wanted us to do is what brought us to this point. And now you want us to go even further? No. There has to be a point where you put your foot down and you say no.
Completely agree. And I think we are also looking at, with this Nets situation, this is one where there is a belief, it's been floated by some credible people, that what they think Joe Tsai, and you mentioned, right, he's a businessman.
Yeah.
What he may do is he's going to get rid of Durant. That is a long-term, potentially negative contract. Not today, it's not negative, probably not next year, but down the line. But it may also be something where a new ownership group, if he's looking to sell, which the theory is, he's going to move Durant, he's going to move Irving, he's going to have Marks rebuild a team that's good, probably not great, probably not a title contender. Then he's going to sell the team for more than he paid for it and move on. And one of the thought processes out there is, one of the things you don't want to do is have a sale or a potential, you're pitching a sale to buyers with, hey, we got 200 million wrapped up in this guy who may not want to be here. What do you think about that? You feel real good about taking a team on in that situation? Right. And that may be ultimately where this plays out. And it might be one of those things where, hey, now look at us. We've got these young players who are exciting, under team control, signed a good value contracts. That's really great. Whether it's Kyrie to LA for Russ and that contract comes off the books, and then we're completely free and clear, and look at all this flexibility and all those kind of things. That could be the process here. Now, there's a question of that should probably be the basketball process anyway, if that's the direction you're going to go, because I don't think it's possible to to trade those guys and flip this team right back into being a title contender in the span of a year, or in the span of a couple months, rather. Maybe in a year, you could rework it around whoever you get for Durant plus Ben Simmons plus flexibility and move forward. But yeah, it's one of those where I kind of waffled, right, and went back and said, maybe KD doesn't get traded now, and we'll see him be there. If we're going to this extent and we're starting to hear reporting come out, and Kevin Durant isn't real shy about taking the social media himself to say, like, oh, these reports are also dumb. Yeah, he hasn't done that. So that leads me to believe this is probably more true than not. And if that's where it is, now I'm back to, well, you can't come to training camp in a month and a half.
That's it.
With Durant walking in with, hey, what's up, Sean? What's up, Steve? How you been? Good summer? Let's get to work. Like, you just can't have that, So this is, I mean, we're again, I feel like I'm just a broken record with this, but it's mid-August. My daughter starts school tomorrow and we still have super duper stars on the trade market. Like, what are we doing?
I mean, this is KD kind of went scorched earth here with the Nets. Like imagine that you walk in, it's the Brooklyn Nets, right? It's the New York market. You walk into media day, you bring Kevin Durant into media day. Oh my God. I mean, you can't do that, right? That would be horrendous. Every single player on your team, the coach, everybody is going to be asked about this situation. That's going to dominate everything. Not what have you been working on? Tell me about the 12 to 15 pounds of muscle that you put on. Tell me about how you're in the best shape of your life. No, all of that stuff is out the window. Instead of all the excitement of media day, it would all be focused around this if you bring Kevin Durant into training camp, which
let me say something on that too. On media day, this screams one of those. And the Nets have not really been, they did some stuff with Kyrie where they kind of protected him at times from things, but they've generally been pretty good working with the media. This screams one though, where it'll be, hey, we're not going to answer any questions about whatever is told to the media right at the start of media day. Doesn't matter. It's the New York market. They're going to ask anyway, and then, so I would honestly call up the NBA and say, hey, what's the maximum possible fine if we don't do media day? If we just say, forget it. Oh, it's $1 million. Here's $1 million. Let's go. We're not doing it. It just almost feels like, what's the point if to your point, no one's going to be like, hey, Cam Thomas, did you work on your ball handling this summer? How do you feel? Is your handle tighter, going into next season? It's just going to be a mess for that. So I'm with you on that one.
Okay, so let's flip this though to Kevin Durant now, because he's been around for a while. He knows the way this game works. He understands, and all we've been hearing is the deal's not there, right? The offers are not what the Nets want. If you're Kevin Durant and you want to be traded and the trades aren't materializing and negotiations aren't sounding positive, doesn't sound like anything's going to get done, you've got to take things to the next level. So how much of this is Kevin Durant trying to push his way out? Like, does he even believe the Nets would go so far as to fire Steve Nash and Sean Marks in order to appease him? Or is this just more of a push to say, I'm done, I'm out, get me out of here right now?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. Kevin Durant, as you said, been around a long time. Also, very smart guy when it comes to this sort of stuff. He knows very likely the Nets are not going to fire Sean Marks and Steve Nash to have him be there, kind of still without those guys. So my guess is what we're going to see with Kevin Durant is this was all right, I'm going to put your feet to the flame a little bit here. And now we kind of get a clock on things. You got about 6-ish weeks and get it done, or you're going to deal with this mess, one way or another. It's either going to be deal with it because I'm here and we have all these questions, or it's going to be, I'm not coming. And then where do we go? It's also important to know Kevin Durant's the kind of guy who has made enough money on and off the court that he can hold out and take the fines and basically say, whatever, I'm not coming in. A lot of people believe it won't come to that and he won't do that, but let's see. So I think the impetus of this was, I'm going to re-meet with him. I'm going to tell him, nope, still want to be traded. Then it's going to get leaked out there of, do this. The other thing we have to consider is it's possible, maybe this came from the Nets side too, because it's, hey, this is the absurd demand that was made of
Exactly.
us. So when we do trade him, we got to
He's the bad
take
guy.
less. Exactly. Now, the challenge comes in though. Well, you started out this kind of little section of the Kevin Cannon segment, which the Kevin Cannon, phenomenal. So good. So good. I like the Home Alone Kevin at the end. That's my favorite part of the
That
whole
had
thing.
to be in there. That had to be in there.
It's perfect. I the trade market just, it's still not there. So now you got to wonder if the Nets are kind of positioning as, hey, when we don't get the Rudy Gobert package, don't kill us because we had to do this,
Yeah.
or X, Y, and Z. From Kevin Durant's side, he should not care much at all what the Nets can get back. Honestly, he should be hoping they get a terrible package back, because that means wherever he went has more to build around him. So yeah, it's just I guess I kind of went back and forth on this of like, all right, he's going to be traded. Well, that hasn't happened for a month. Now it's, all right, I guess he'll just show up and we'll figure this out and we'll go into the season. To now I'm back to
How can you
this
do that?
this is a little ugly now. Now we might need to let this go. And if something else comes out later this week, as far as more reporting or something that's a little worse, then that says to me, all right, we're probably looking at a mid-August trade. That's probably going to be, well, probably if Kevin Durant is traded, it'll be massive for what the implications are around the NBA.
Well, let's talk about that then. Let's talk about where this comes from, right? Because Kevin Durant looks awful with what's going on here, right? Sure. I mean, this is the franchise bent over backwards for him, right? In order to bring in DeAndre Jordan, right? Here's $40 million DeAndre Jordan because you're friends with Kevin Durant, right? Like this franchise gave him a lot. Nets fans are furious, and they should be. This is awful for Nets fans. This is awful for the Nets. What's going on? They thought, okay, we're getting two stars that are going to lead us to championships. They looked really good at certain points, and it has completely collapsed. And now you've got, in theory, the way this looks to me from a narrative perspective, Kevin Durant was part of the decision-making process. They made some terrible decisions, and now he's saying, I made bad decisions. I want out because you guys can't fix what I messed up, right? Like that's not a good look for Kevin Durant. But then where is this coming from? We talk about this all the time, read between the lines. Where is this leak coming from? Kevin Durant looks terrible in this situation. The Nets are put in a tough spot, trade leverage wise, but they may just be at a point where maybe it did come from the Nets side, and they just want Nets fans to understand, like, hey, we got to get rid of this guy. Like, is that where this really came from? Like, we always talk about trying to figure out where the leaks are from and where the bias in the story is. That's the only thing I can really come up with, because it has to be somebody who's close to the situation. It's got to be either the Nets or Kevin Durant. But trade leverage wise, this isn't great for the Nets either.
No, it's definitely not. And from the Kevin Durant side, I don't think he cares what anybody's opinion is about him on anything. I think he stopped, or he at least projects that he doesn't care. That's maybe a better way to.
But he does defend himself on Twitter.
That's exactly
quite a bit for somebody who doesn't care.
Yeah, so that's exactly why I changed it to projects that he doesn't care, right? So I think his thought process is, hey, I am I'm not coming in. You guys can all yell at me. I want to trade. I don't really care what you think, but then I'll come back and yell at you about all the reasons why it was fine that I wanted to trade. So I think that's where that's at, is if his group's the one who leaked it, I don't know that he's going to be swayed by, well, people might be mad. I think he's probably is, people will be mad and I'll just fight all of them on Twitter one by one and, do battle.
Right.
I think from the Nets side, this to me, the only way this comes out if it came from the Nets is to start prepping Nets fans and general fans in general for, hey, our leverage is shot. We can't get the Gobert package. We can't get what Boston got from us. So, we're going to do the best we can, but we've got to move on. We got to do this. And I guarantee you, if and when there's a trade, there will be some line to the extent of the following that will read something like, we had to make this trade now because we didn't want distractions going into the season.
Correct.
And we feel we did the best we could under those circumstances.
There's a narrative of they'd be reclaiming their franchise. They'd be taking their team back, right?
And I think there are a lot of Nets fans, at least my read, going through social media that are perfectly fine with that. That are like, hey, we liked the scrappy team that was, being built around Dinwiddie, Harris, LeVert, Jared Allen, that was built, kind of from the ground up. We fell in love with that team. We all do, right? Everybody, like, that's part of the reason why Celtics fans are so conflicted on trading Jaylen Brown, because it's like, Jaylen Brown's our guy.
That's
like,
your guy. Yep.
We drafted him. Like, we were the ones who built him up. Like I've, bought into that. I'm there. I don't want to trade him and all this stuff. And that becomes very hard on fans there. And then you very quickly talk yourself into, well, you get Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. Like, we're going to go win a championship. So, as much as I loved, Karis LeVert, see you later, bud. We got the 2 stars. So yeah, but I think that's probably where this is headed, is the Nets are just trying to set everybody up for, hey, when we don't get the 5 players plus every pick under the sun package, I think they're trying to set everybody up for it. Hey, that's just not realistic under the circumstances.
But then this is why I think this probably is coming from the Nets. And not necessarily KD. There's the bit in there about the Nets want every asset from whoever they're trading with. Like, I don't think they're getting that.
Because Kevin Durant's going to put that. Unless Kevin Durant's group is saying, like, the Nets aren't being realistic.
That's true.
But I don't think that's, I don't know. I just don't think that's what they're not. Because in the end, they don't want them to trade everything, right? You want them to keep, like, if it's Toronto, you want them to keep Scotty Barnes.
Right.
You want to play with Scotty Barnes because he's really good. Like, if you're Boston, you don't want it to be Jaylen Brown plus a bunch of picks. You want it to be Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and something from the Kevin Durant side with that. So we should mention, too, was reiterated in Sham's piece yesterday, Boston, Toronto, and Miami are the kind of 3 primary suitors for Durant. I forget exactly how we worded it, but they're the known teams right now. So I still think Toronto would not shock me, because it's Masai. I just think he would. I just think he's got the gravitas to say, all right, we're going to do it. I don't think it'll be Scotty Barnes, but it wouldn't surprise me if he said, yeah, let's go. Let's make the trade anyway, and we'll figure out the rest of it later.
Now, your Celtics are now the betting favorite to land Kevin Durant. And I think the Shams piece is certainly part of that. Something around Jaylen Brown from previous discussions that we've had, it sounded like the Nets want Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and stuff. And the Celtics would prefer it's Jaylen Brown, maybe Derek White, something like that. Not Marcus Smart, right? Just not Marcus Smart. What's the temperature of Celtics fans? Are they for doing this? I would imagine Celtics fans are saying not Marcus Smart as well, because you want a good deal. But if push comes to shove, if it's you can get Kevin Durant, are you doing it, or do you draw the line and say, nope, we're keeping Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, then we don't want KD?
A lot of Celtics fans look at it and say, hey, we're in Game 6 of the NBA Finals with what we had. We added Malcolm Brogdon and Danilo Gallinari. Why are we giving up anything of what we had, for Kevin Durant? There are some who are like, it's Kevin Durant. Like, if you had Kevin Durant in place of Jaylen Brown last year in the finals, they probably win the finals, right? Like, there's also, I think there's a bit of twisted logic in there where Durant didn't play well in the first round series.
Oh.
And that's, I think, kind of the last impression people have, because there are some who've gone way too far the other direction of like, I wouldn't trade, back end bench players for Kevin Durant, which is like, come on, what are we doing? Like, if you could get Kevin Durant without trading Jaylen Brown, of course you would. Like, everyone in the league would go do that. That's just, silly talk. But there are some who are like, hey, like what we have, like, why are we going to give up depth and all this other stuff for this guy who's kind of known to be cranky and a malcontent. And
Yeah.
is he going to pull this a year in here and not want to be here
Is
either?
it Kyrie all over again?
Yeah, there's some of that. There's
Yeah.
also some people who Boston is a kind of place where it is. You said no before back in 2016. You said no, and you picked the Warriors. So you know what? Screw you. I never want you to come here. There are some. Now, if it happens, we all know how this goes. We root for laundry in the end, right? And it'll be, you know what, Kevin Durant is awesome, and him and Jason
Yeah.
Tatum are unstoppable, and
As soon as
Banner
he starts
18,
putting
here
up
we
points
go.
for your team, then
Exactly.
it changes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll go that way, but there are a lot of people who it wouldn't matter if it was Jaylen Brown and Derek White and one pick. There are people who are like, absolutely not. I know like legitimate, not crazy fans who they wouldn't do Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant straight up just because they just don't
Wow.
want the headache. They're like, I just don't want the headache. And it also builds back into that's our guy, man. Like he
Yeah.
was like, and people kind of forget he was the first pick of those Nets picks to really land and really, come into something really great. Because the first one was a mid-round pick. But when they got Jaylen Brown, it was like, wow, this guy's pretty good. And which is kind of funny because if the pick was booed on draft night because people wanted Dragan Bender. So it was
That's
like,
right.
but that's all. I mean, that's just draft night, right? Like, these teams, always know better than most fans do. But yeah, man, it's tough. I don't know. I don't think they talked themselves into it after it was done, but right now, I think I bet if you put up a poll that wasn't going to get inundated by bias, I think you'd find more are against trading Jaylen Brown in a deal for Kevin Durant than are for it.
Well, and I think any team that's trading for him has to consider he was unhappy in Golden State and seemed to have a perfect basketball situation. He's unhappy in Brooklyn, and the Nets did everything they possibly could. Some things that maybe were walking the fine line between what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. I mean, there's been plenty of stories about that, and he's still unhappy.
Yeah.
What's to prevent us from being in this spot a year
Yep.
from now or 2 years from now? Teams have to be concerned about that. You talked about the Raptors. I think they're an interesting.
One thing I want to say too,
Yeah.
because I think this applies to both the Raptors and Miami too, is I think a lot of fans are also looking at it as this guy's older and he's had serious injuries and missed a ton of time over the last few years. Even his last two healthy seasons, he's missed a bunch of time. So I think there are a lot of people who are like, I just don't like, what is that going to be years 3 and 4 of that contract? Like are those going to be completely lost years because he's injured and he's hurt again and we're only getting that. I mean, just from the Celtics standpoint too, they're already looking at it as like Malcolm Brogdon's an awesome fit and going to give us everything, provided Malcolm Brogdon can play more than the 45 or so games he's been playing in recent years. Danilo Gallinari's older and has missed some time, so there is some thought process in there, and I do think that factors into the Heat fans and Raptors fans as well. Of Kevin Durant is awesome, but is Kevin Durant in 2 years when he's making $45 to $50 million? Is he awesome then too?
Right. That's the concern there with KD and that long term deal. The Raptors have some pieces that they can certainly trade in order to get him. Whether or not they give up Scotty Barnes, they've got other guys. We can talk OG Anunoby. You can talk Pascal Siakam, Gary Trent Jr. You've got some interesting things there that Masai could ultimately kind of cobble together into a trade. I'm not saying you give up all of that, but I'm saying there's different iterations of trades you can work. Miami is a tricky one.
I just don't see it.
I understand Miami gets their name in every single trade because they're going to do everything they possibly can. They can get creative and all of that. And that's a credit to the Heat. That's a credit to Pat Riley, credit to the organization. They do a great job getting involved in all of these
they're
trades.
The Lakers East, right? Like
they find a way.
Same thing. Yeah. They are arguably, because New York has been down for so long, they're the prime East Coast destination. It's weather, no state taxes, all that stuff factors in, and they win more often than they don't.
I just don't see how they get there, especially compared to what the Celtics and Raptors theoretically can offer.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Heat, right? So you got to get to 40 million to match salary. So that means you've got to get to about 30 to 35 million in general in salaries. And the Heat, here's the Heat's big salaries. Bam Adebayo. All right, well, they're not going to trade him because they'd want to have him with Kevin Durant. They also can't because then Brooklyn would have Bam and Simmons on the designated player. Jimmy Butler, well, that's a no-go. Kyle
Yeah.
Lowry, I think that's probably more in play than people want to give credit to. I think the Heat would look at it and say, you know what, we were just fine with Gabe Vincent at the point for most of the year, so why not?
Sure.
Duncan Robinson, that's an easy one. But then you got to get the Heat to be like, yes, please give us the what is it, $74 million remaining on Duncan Robinson's deal when he wasn't even in your rotation at the end of the season.
Right. The Nets aren't going to want that.
Now, where it gets a little more interesting is the other thing too. Tyler Hero, sure, but Tyler Hero is only 5.7 million this year, so that's the challenge because he's still on the last year of his rookie scale deal. Now, what Miami did this offseason, which was really smart, was they gave Dwayne Dedman a little bit more money than probably should be a minimum guy. They gave him 4.7 million, with the next year completely non-guaranteed. They gave Caleb Martin, who I actually like, but they gave him 6.5 million. They gave Victor Oladipo 8.75 million with a player option. So what they could do is if they wanted to say, hey, can you let this go until mid-December or to mid-January? Maybe by the trade deadline if it's still dragging, then they can get involved and it's a lot easier. Now they'd sacrifice most, if not all, of their depth, but it's Miami. You figure we'll make some of that back up through buyout guys and all that.
Finding
We'll figure
players.
that out. Yeah, exactly. If we have Kyle Lowry, Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo, we can put Trevor in the starting five and Keith in as the sixth man. We're probably going to be all right.
I don't know. I don't think we would. I think even then, I would find a way to be a massive negative on the floor.
You'd probably be okay. I could run around and pretend to shoot.
I could set a few screens and
And
things.
run around is very loose terms.
Guys could run me over. That'll be fine.
That's it. Yeah, I'll take charges.
I'll take some charges.
Yeah, I'll take charges. Kyle Lowry takes a bunch. I'll take the heat off Kyle Lowry. I'll plant myself in the middle of the paint.
There you go.
Take a few charges and yeah. I'll take. Let me rephrase. I'll take a charge, be out for a month and a half, recovering from taking that charge, and then I'll come back and take another one.
Hey, just give me the veteran minimum salary. I'd be just fine with that. I'll sit on the IR all season. That'll be
it makes me laugh. I used to say all the time, I'm like, they could just pay me to sit on the end of the bench. Just pay me enough. And then as I learned, there's an actual minimum salary. Oh, and they can get people who can actually play for that minimum salary. Well, I guess my dreams have ever
there it goes.
Yeah.
There goes
I better win the Powerball Mega Millions, buy a team and insert myself in the lineup, or otherwise it's never going to happen.
It's not happening. It's not happening.
Oh, wow.
Last thing on this topic before we reluctantly move on. Kyrie Irving reportedly agrees with Kevin Durant, doesn't like Sean Marks, doesn't like Steve Nash. So I don't think this is necessarily 100%. If Kevin Durant is moved, then Kyrie Irving is immediately traded. I don't think the Nets have to do that, but I think it greatly increases the likelihood that Kyrie is on the way out the door as well. That the Nets would want to just say, you know what, let's clear the air. Let's move on from this entire era of Nets basketball. If we move Kevin Durant, let's move Kyrie as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if the Nets, if you could game plan this out, which is right. This is kind of what you do on the trade machine. If you fire up 2K, right? I'm going to trade Kevin Durant for a good package of stuff back. I'm going to trade Kyrie Irving for basically, hopefully something good.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to get long-term salary relief. I think that's why it's been, hey, you want Kevin Durant? You got to take Joe Harris too. You want Kyrie Irving? You got to take Joe Harris too. I think the goal is, if we're going to do this, I want as little long-term salary that's not rookie players as possible. I want, obviously I'll take Jaylen Brown back, but I want as little long-term salary that's not tied up in rookie scale deals as I can get. because I want to really, all right, if I'm doing this, there's no quick fix on this one. It just doesn't exist. It is tear it basically all the way down, and let's start fresh around whatever we get back, plus our flexibility with cap space down the line, plus draft picks and all this stuff, and let's go forward.
Yeah, and that's probably what we see play out again. The Nets don't have to do that if they want to continue to try to win with Kyrie or something. They can. I mean, there were the reports that Kyrie, was committed to Brooklyn and everything. But if Kyrie is in that camp too of I want these guys gone, it probably makes the most sense.
I do think Kyrie's in a slightly different spot where just because of everything that happened last year, I think for his own basketball future, he is probably more likely to show up and just kind of maybe takes like the Marshawn Lynch approach of, hey, I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Yeah.
Does his thing, plays, and off he goes, and we see where it all ends up. Versus I could see Kevin Durant basically saying, I'm not coming. Like, get me out of here. Where I think for Kyrie, you kind of can't do that a second year in a row and then expect teams to fall all over themselves to trade for you, sign you, whatever it is.
We've talked about this at length already, but I mean, maybe the biggest part of this is going to become an even bigger battle for the next CBA. This was already kind of a sensitive topic for NBA owners, right? Players asking out with 4 years remaining on their contracts. Now you've got a superstar player who is demanding specific personnel be fired, sort of trying to say, hey, look, I'm controlling this organization. You do what I say here. And again, whether or not he believes that's really going to happen, this is going to come to a head in the next CBA. I think ownership is going to want some sort of protection against situations like this from happening. I don't know what that would look like, but big picture, this could be the end of, or the limit, I should say, of the player empowerment era. I don't think the player empowerment era is done, but I think we're hitting a point now where instead of teams just saying, okay, players, whatever you want, we'll make it happen. You guys are the stars. Tell us what you want and we'll do it. I think we're getting to a point where teams are starting to say no. They're going to start to say enough. And I think this could become a contentious topic in the next collective bargaining agreement discussions.
I'm going to remove the could. It's going to be.
Yeah.
I think I say this regularly, and I don't mean this to come off snarky or dismissive at all. The big stuff in the NBA is figured out. Splitting this giant sum of money. That is largely figured out, right? They kind of know, all right, it's basically going to be 50-50, 51-49. That's going to be where it goes. We're all in agreement. Everybody kind of knows that. That is, I don't care what anybody says. All this stuff is stuff we care about. It's the money in the end is what matters, right? It's we're making more money than we could have ever dreamed imaginable. We came back from all these pandemic impacted seasons and we're still doing good. And guess what? We have all these TV networks lined up to throw billions of dollars at us over the next several years. Let's all be smart about this. I think the rest of it though becomes the stuff, and that's quite frankly to me far more interesting, right? Because it's things like this. But I think, right, and I'm not disputing at all what you say. I think ownership is going to say, yeah, I don't like it. We signed Kevin Durant to a 4-year contract extension. Year one hasn't even started yet, and he's already asking for a trade with that extension. We signed player X to this 5-year rookie scale deal, and a year into it, I don't want to be there. 5-year rookie scale extension deal. I don't want to be there anymore. I want to go. I think on the flip side, you have players, because we hear it all the time, well, they can just trade us whenever they want.
Right.
And it is a two-way street. You can't say, well, you signed they signed a contract too. Now I get it. You sign a contract knowing part of the life in sports is you might get traded somewhere. But it's like when people say, well, my company can tell me to move, or they can tell me, well, then then you're going to be let go. Yeah. And if you're under contract, some portion of that contract, unless you're an idiot and signed a terrible contract, is going to get paid out.
Yeah.
to you, right? If you say like, I'm not moving cross country, I'm not doing this. I mean, we have a lot of people running through that right now where some whole businesses picked up operations and moved during the pandemic when it's like, hey, we don't have the office anymore, so let's move. And now it's, well, we're bringing people back in, but now we're located in this other state. But anyway, to go into the NBA side, I think where this is going to head is there's going to be certain deals. Maybe it's all deals, but there's definitely going to be certain deals where if it's a 4 or 5 year deal, there's just going to be no trade till you're 2 years in.
Yeah.
Or something like that. There's already some trade restrictions around sign the designated player. There's no trade for a full year with that, but nobody wants a year in, especially as just as these extensions are getting started, someone saying, yeah, I don't want to be here anymore. Because then it looks like, as we've called it out, take the money, you ask for a trade later.
Yep.
I think that's where we're headed with this. And I think that'll be more than anything else, probably what juices free agency a little bit more. Because I think you may see some guys say, I'm not locking in then for the full 4 or 5 years or whatever it is, because I don't know that I want to be there with this team, especially if it's different. But if it was like a Bradley Beal situation where I've given you a decade and then I'm re-signing because you can offer me this ungodly sum of money that I've never could have dreamed of being. Here we go. And now 2 years into that, and I'm not saying Bradley Beal's going to do that because that does seem very different type situation, but that's where we're at, right? Is those guys then can say, yeah, I don't want to go, in this. So I do think it's going to be very, to your point, it's going to be very contentious. To use your wording on that one, I completely agree. But I think you're going to have it from both sides, basically saying, all right, hey, if you don't want guys asking for trades, then we don't want you trading them. And I think there's a point to be made on both sides. Hey, you agreed to this contract. You agreed, let's spend the next 4 or 5 years together. Why is either side, a year or two in being like, well, this sucks? Or maybe it's a mutual agreement, right? Maybe if it's 2 years in, it's like, hey, superstar X, superstar Y that you were going to play with blew out his knee and now his career's over. Yeah, it's best for us to move you and it's best for you to move on. Then maybe that's where you get to, is it becomes mutual agreement and that's where the trades go. But yeah, I mean, that's topics for later, but but I think we're headed to a lot of this stuff being the things that are the fights and the negotiations.
Yeah. Just big picture. This situation is going to become ammunition towards a much bigger battle that's going to be taking place with the CBA.
Yep. And it's, to be fair to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, it's not really Kevin Durant, because Kyrie, I guess, hasn't asked for a trade, but Kevin Durant, he didn't start this. Like this was
no.
James Harden last year, Ben Simmons last year, like many players before them. Like this has been building year over year over year. This is just now the kind of, if you will, it's a proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, right? It's exactly like, here we are.
Exactly. Speaking of something that is, we do actually have a few other topics to get into, but something that is somewhat Durant adjacent here. The NBA schedule is not out yet. And now, like, how much is the league office scrambling right now? We'd heard schedule maybe next week. Can they put out the schedule without knowing where Kevin Durant is going to be? Like, that's a challenge with one of your biggest stars. You don't know, like, national TV games, you want these guys to be available. And if the Nets trade Kyrie and trade KD and they don't get back win now pieces, you're not going to give them as many nationally televised games. So what does the NBA do with this situation?
Yeah, you're going to hold as long as you can. My guess is they've got a loose framework laid out for here's what we think it'll be. But to your point, opening night, Christmas Day, MLK Day, the Thursday nights on TNT, which are still the more exclusive night in the league. Those are all major kind of dates on the NBA calendar. And it's not as easy as people just say, well, but they flex teams out of national TV all the time.
It's arena schedules and all.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And you can also say, yeah, sure. But like, look at Thursday nights. The vast majority of Thursday nights, you might only have one game or maybe 2 games in the window, right? You kind of have the 7 to 8 p.m. start window in the East, and then you have the 9:30 to 10:30 start window in the West. If you only have the Nets, and then let's say the other game is Magic Pistons in the East on a Thursday night in that early window, well, do you really? I mean, and now people are going to be like, I'd rather watch Magic Pistons, and quite frankly, I might rather too. But the vast majority of people want to see the really good game there. You also have that Saturday night package on ABC that comes out where that is the those Saturday night showcase games. So it's not quite as easy as it seems to well just flex it out and put a different game in there. You can do that, but you have to have other games to put in that window. So do you if you hit a point where let's say it's the end of this week and none of this has gone down, do you really look at it and say, all right, well, let's just beef up the day. We'll put 3 games in the Eastern window. Just in that way, if the Nets do trade these guys, they're not very good, we can bump them out and we can put another team in there. But the big tent poles, Christmas, MLK, opening day, once those are set, you can't change them. Right, those are what they are. So, yeah, this is the thing, and we've seen them hold the schedule before. The most famous example I think of this was when Kevin Garnett got traded. They held the schedule, then they redid large chunks of it because Boston was not going to be a very good team, not a team a lot of people wanted to watch. Then they got Kevin Garnett, and it was like, we got to get the Celtics on prime time as much as we can. So it should normally be this week. This week should be when we start getting that stuff. I think that'll probably be next week. And it's not that, Adam Silver and the TV partners are going to be pushing, hey, we got to make a trade. Let's get this done so we get the schedule done. They'll find other ways around it if those guys are still on those teams. But yeah, it's definitely holding things up for sure.
I feel for those schedule makers. And I mean, as stressed as we've been about all of this stuff that's been going on and for the last month or so, jumping every time our phone goes off and all of that, it's a whole different world when you're actually having to build something as complicated as the NBA schedule when you're trying to balance everything. I mean, talk about these arenas they don't just sit empty when teams aren't playing. There's all kinds of different things that you have to schedule around. And it's all kind of on hold with this situation. Don't envy the schedule makers at all right now.
A lot of these teams too, they're the secondary, sometimes third, sometimes fourth tenant in their building. The Celtics, the building is owned by the Bruins, so it's the Bruins first. They get all the primary dates that they want to have and the times that they want to have, and then the Celtics slot in and around that. But it's like, I mean, right? You have with the Lakers. I don't know if they still do it, but they always went on that road trip because of the Grammys, right?
The Grammys, yep.
The Spurs is probably the most famous one with the rodeo trip, where they get booted out of their building when the rodeo comes around. In Boston, for years and years when I was a kid, they rarely played home games in February because the circus was in town and set up inside Boston Garden for like a month worth of time. So everybody's got this stuff. And if you're in a building like in LA where 3 teams share the building, that's already hard. I mean, and we know they do it all the time. They hate doing the double header where it's one team plays in the afternoon and then one of the other teams plays in the evening because it's just a mess. It becomes a huge hassle to flip the building and do all that stuff. So yeah, it's not easy. I mean, it's funny. I know a couple people have worked on scheduling stuff. And they were like, yeah, the pandemic years were actually the easiest because there was nothing else. There were no concerts. There were no shows. There was none of that other stuff. So it was just us. And in a lot of the cases, we don't have to worry about the fans because there were no fans. So it was like, hey, you're not going to play Tuesday. Now you're going to play 3 Thursdays from now. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Like we're there.
No big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. We did see a couple of transactions take place. The Kings got Quinn Cook and Kent Bazemore, former Lakers, to join up with
former Lakers, former Warriors.
Yes.
Zach Grenadive has a fondness for former Warriors.
Yep. So both of these guys land there. I don't know whether or not they stick, but we'll see. Kings making moves. The Kings are looking better now in the Western Conference. The West is going to be absolutely brutal this year. The Kings are going to be hoping to make a playoff push here, but you add a couple of quality veterans here, guys who are good locker room players, things like that. And again, I don't know if they stick, and if they do, it's probably not like a lot of minutes here, but still noteworthy. The Kings are still adding players.
Yeah, I mean that's what this is this is adding guys at the end of the bench for them. I mean, they still have KZ Okpala, who they're going to bring in. He was presumably going to be the 15th man. They brought in Matthew Dellavedova. They brought in Chima Moneke in there, an undrafted player from a couple of years ago that's been playing overseas. So and he also played for Mike Brown on the Nigerian national team. Now you bring in Bazemore and Cook, and this to me says, we're in a position now where we want to kind of wage that training camp battle. Let's have, guys kind of fighting it out for roster spots at the back end of our roster. And they've got a couple guys they could move on from relatively easy. And the Kings in the past have been known, especially if it's an expiring salary, they'll eat a salary of four or 5 million. So a guy like Alex Len, they're like, we've got more than enough bigs. We don't have any room for you because we want to keep Kent Bazemore. They've been known that they'll eat that salary, if they have to, just to kind of keep things moving. So yeah, I don't know that these swing anything at this point with these two guys, but it's at least notable enough that the Kings feel like they were in the position where we can bring in a couple veterans for the end of the bench.
And last thing, we've got Toronto. Now we've heard the NBA, their vaccination situation is going to change. They're not going to be worried about that quite as much this season. But in Toronto, players who are not vaccinated will still be ineligible to play this coming season. And of course, everybody thinks of Kyrie Irving initially. Interesting to note, though, it's going to be different from the rest of the NBA in Toronto because, again, it's in another country.
Yeah, exactly. Canada sounds like their policy will still be to enter. You must be have at least one dose of vaccine or an approved medical exemption. In the NBA, we know there were none. They approved no one for medical exemption. So there are a couple things that were added on to this reporting. I think Tim Bontemps of ESPN added on to this. I think it was Jake Fisher had the initial report. But when Bontemps added on, what he added was players will have to be listed as out health and safety protocols, as well as they'll lose their money. They won't get paid for any games missed. We know Matisse Thybulle missed games last year in the playoffs for the 76ers. So that's one player. And then we also know there was questions around Jaylen Brown, Al Horford. The Celtics, they declined to answer those questions when they were asked if they were fully vaccinated. To be fair, because people will point it out, it's the same rule sent to the United States from Canada. The reason no one really talks about it is the Raptors, at least last season, were fully vaccinated.
Right.
Which they would have had to have been to have their players available for their home games in Canada, but they were fully vaccinated. So them crossing the border multiple times
wasn't a big deal.
Wasn't a big deal. So yeah, and they have they're playing 2 preseason games outside of Toronto this year, one in Edmonton and one in Montreal. And one of those, the one in Montreal, is actually against Boston. So we may get some idea of what the vaccination status is. And why this matters is Toronto's a good team. They're probably going to be a playoff team. And just like last year, you don't want to get into the playoffs and not have a key player available because of vaccination status. And we saw it with the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays made some trades. This guy, I don't know if you follow this, but if anybody does, this guy, Whit Merrifield, played for the Kansas City Royals about a week or so before the trade deadline, couldn't play in Toronto. Then the Blue Jays traded for him, and he subsequently got vaccinated so that he could then play in Toronto, play those home games. So it's just something we got to keep an eye on here because it's, it's still, as much as, we may not like it, it's the world we live in right now.
Yep. I can attest to that. It is still very much present.
Yeah.
Still something.
It didn't go away. Yeah, exactly.
Nope.
Yep.
Still something that we are dealing with. All right. Well, wound up being a supersized show today, Keith, but a lot of stuff to dive into with this whole Kevin Durant situation. And of course, you never know. We're a Shams tweet away from this whole situation taking another turn. So make sure you are subscribed right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our Clips channel as well. And of course, follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.